Everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I am hoping you can hear me. I see someone has messaged in the chat. They can't hear anything. If you can hear me, can you put a note in the chat? Okay. Yes. All right. Very good. Good. Thank you for that. I am Lana Shope, and I am the project director for the National Community Action Partnerships CARES project. We are excited to be part of a new partnership we formed with US Digital Response, and they are going to be part of our presentation today. One thing we tend to do is try to center ourselves by remembering the promise of community action. For those of us in the network, this is a message that was created to try to capture who we are and what we do and why we do it. It's a good exercise as we try to release ourselves from all the clutter in our minds from what we did the moment before we joined the webinar to focus on what we're going to learn today with our US Digital Response partners. So community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And I do love this statement and really like starting our webinars by saying that out loud. Wonderful. So we are about to undertake a learning of keeping the human in human services for implementing user-centered design. And the partnership has begun working directly with US Digital Response, which is one of the most exciting partnerships we have so far in my work at the partnership. And I am very excited for you to learn from them about keeping the human in human services. We have 3 presenters who will be part of the program today, Jessica Watson, Marlene Cortés, and Paul Schreiber. And I'm going to turn it over to US Digital Response.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for being here with us today. My name is Jessica Watson. I'm the Chief People Officer at US Digital Response. I also started as a volunteer with US Digital Response in March of last year. And I also have a background in the design and tech industry for about the last 10 years. So I'm excited to talk with you more about how you can bring user-centered design into the work that you do each and every day. Let's go over to the agenda. So first, I'll start by telling you a bit about US Digital Response in case you don't know who we are. And then I'll do my 101 crash course in US-centered design for all of you. But what will be really exciting is then digging into an actual case study so you can see what user-centered design looks like in practice and how that impacts the impact that we're able to have on people in the world because of using user-centered design. Then we'll talk through a few learnings and takeaways, and then finally, we'll make sure we have room for Q&A for all of you. Next. So US Digital Response is a nonprofit, nonpartisan effort that helps governments and organizations respond quickly and efficiently to support the critical needs of the public. Founded in 2020, USDR connects governments and organizations with a surge of technology, resources, and support at critical moments, leaving them better equipped to deliver services and support to millions of people nationwide. Next slide. So how we work, we meet governments and organizations where they are without regard to a specific tech stack. We always think about sustainability and when possible from the outset, and when possible reusability from the outset, and train partners or their vendors on how to maintain any of the products or services that we help them create. We also serve the immediate needs of the public by quickly activating highly skilled talent, leveraging modern technology, and providing tactical surge capacity to public servants on the front line. Our diverse cohort of pro bono tech experts and technologists have deep experience spanning engineering, data science, content strategy, design, logistics, supply chain, disaster response, and more and more and more. And when we get a response or a request from a government team or an organization, we get in touch with them within 24 hours to understand the problem, who they're trying to serve or support, and how they solve the problem, and what infrastructure they have, what's needed, etc. From there, we look carefully through our past projects and pools of volunteers to find people with the right skills, availability, and background to help. And we're very intentional about this process. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that our partners are able to be as successful as possible in whatever they're trying to do to serve their communities. Next slide. To date, we've partnered with more than 180 government and nonprofit partners across 36 states and territories. We've taken on more than 290 projects, impacting more than 18 million people, and we've built a dedicated community of almost 7,000 highly skilled volunteers that are driven to serve in the time of need. Next. We've supported governments and NGOs with solutions on a wide variety of topics, including unemployment insurance, digitized workflows, vaccine preparedness, voting and elections, data aggregation and visualization, small business support, food security, CARES Act management, and more. And we're driven by the needs of governments across the country, approaching each interaction free of agenda and with a desire to provide immediate support. Next slide. So, where does user-centered, or go back one, sorry. Where does user-centered design play in our work? We believe that good technology enables the delivery of real services to real people, and that the success of a technical solution is measured by whether it made a meaningful difference in the lives of people at the right time. So with that in mind, each and every project incorporates an element of user-centered design. But what is user-centered design? Next slide. At its most basic, user-centered design is designing for the people or users, we often call them users, who will actually use your product or service. Next slide. So I'm going to take you through a thought exercise I've run with hundreds of folks who are new to user-centered design. Don't worry, this is just a thought exercise, so you don't need to submit anything, but I want you to just spend a few moments thinking about how you would design the perfect wallet. What would it look like? What materials would it be made of? What functionality would you want it to have? How big is it? How small is it? How thick is it? Okay, give you a few more seconds to think on this a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to make an assumption here. Without a good sense of who this wallet is for, you are likely designing the perfect wallet for you. And that's great if the end user is you. But in most of the things that we're building, the end user isn't me. It's a community that may look very different than me. So let's do a different task. Next slide. What if we had a better sense of who the user is? Design the perfect wallet for a woman who wants a wallet they can take with them when they go for a run that remains hidden to passersby. Now, what does that have you start thinking about? Sounds like it should probably be thin, maybe easy to put in small pockets or in shorts or pants. I might actually have more questions now, like how many cards does this wallet need to carry? Where are they going to want to put it? Are they going to want to constantly change from their normal wallet to this wallet, or would it be easier if this wallet was just a wallet they could easily pull out of their existing wallet? Essentially, what I'm trying to show is that once you get a better sense of the users, where the thing you're building fits into their day-to-day lives, you get to have a better sense of what the actual solution should be. Next slide. Now, if you Google user-centered design, you will find, as I did this morning, hundreds and hundreds of different charts, some that can be utterly complex. But if you boil it down, they all really have three things in common, these three components. First is research. It really begins with research to get to know your users, their objectives, the context in which they're using the product or service that you're creating. The next is empathy, like turning that research into empathy so that you're able to put yourself in the place of the users that you're actually designing and building for. And then finally is iteration, and this is really important. This is an interactive process that allows you to get more feedback along the way. Once you design something, take it back to your users, get feedback, iterate it on a little bit so that you can constantly evaluate and improve the product to make sure that it's the best product possible for the people that you're trying to build for. Next slide. So what does this look like in your process more practically? First step is really defining audience and goals. Now, who is the audience you're building for? Who are those users? This is really helpful to get specific. The prompt earlier was really women who are running. And that is very specific, and it helps you really understand the audience you're trying to solve for. And then identifying the intended goals of your work. What are you trying to help the user do at the end of the day? Next. Then is user experience research. And this is, if you are able to talk to real people who are using your product, that's amazing. But also within your organizations, you probably have folks who talk to people all the time, and you may be able to tap them for questions on what are the needs that they're constantly hearing from people? What are the questions that are asked when they call on the phone? Where are the biggest pain points that they're seeing when they're encountering your product or service? And also, like, what are the circumstances in which they're using this product or service? You can imagine there are some that are during very stressful moments, and so that may change the way you think about creating the service, and if it was one that's done when people have the leisure of a lot of time. Next. Then function and design. It's really important then, as you start to decide what you're building, that you ensure the website or product is accessible, flexible, and intuitive for your target audiences. This is when it can be really helpful to look at other products and services you see out in the world that are doing this really well, that are easy to use, that are really easy to understand, that make sense. The flows make sense. I think we've all, bad design is really easy to recognize because we've all experienced those pain points where it just doesn't make sense why things are functioning that way. And great design often ends up being invisible because you're able to do the thing you want to do seamlessly. But yeah, this is a very important point. And also just the function and design part I want to call out. There's a world where that you can make things very functional, but they're not well designed and they're hard to use. So you've probably been places where you can technically do all the things you want to do, but it's very hard still to do them. And then the opposite is also true, where it can be beautifully designed, but it can be without function, like you don't understand how to use it. So it's really important to get design things at the intersection of function and design. And then last, iteration. So this is very important. Ongoing feedback, evaluations, getting feedback from your users. If you have people who are on the call, have call questions change, or on the phone, have call questions changed now that you've implemented this new change? Are you seeing more submits? Are people able to get through your flow faster? Is the data supporting that updates are working in the way that you expected? Next slide. So at USDR, we incorporate user-centered design in almost everything we do. We've worked with a lot of different partners that have very different users that are at very different points in the process, from working with helping seniors access digital services. We had to do a lot of research to understand what are the needs of seniors, what are their expectations in that space. A survey to help small business owners toward grant opportunities, like what are the key questions they're asking that we can help make easier, to ensuring that voting and election websites or vaccine websites are informative and are answering the primary needs that people have when they come to these sites. Next. So I'll just go a little bit deeper into two projects quickly before we go into our case study. But one is with the LA County Office of Immigrant Affairs. So as the pandemic unfolded, the Office of Immigrant Affairs saw a big increase in the number of inquiries regarding the immigration status applications of people tapping into county services, as well as requests for any resources available to immigrants and their families. Now more than ever, 3.6 million immigrants were looking for resources and services to help them get through the pandemic and its economic fallout. So we partnered with the LA County OIA to create a new design for their website as an entry point for county immigrants to access information about critical services to meet their basic needs. What we found was that there were many services that were available, but it was really hard to figure out where to go to one. And so this really helped bring an entry point into all that was just one place people could go to then figure out where was the service or organization that they need to go to access information. The website also included information about some of the most pressing immigrant questions. It created this new map-based search interface because we found that really finding the services that are closest to you were most important. And it also helps define like how close were public services to public transportation. And all of this was based on research that we did to really understand the immigrant community, their needs, and the challenges that they were facing as they were trying to access resources. Next slide. The next project is Neighbor Express. During the COVID-19 crisis, it really exacerbated existing challenges when it came to ensuring at-risk individuals who couldn't or didn't want to leave the house for health reasons, how they had access to groceries, medicine, or household items. And people who couldn't leave their homes still needed these things. And at the same time, if you remember back a year ago, there were a lot of people who were really looking for ways to help and were having a hard time finding opportunities and places where their help was wanted. So what Neighbor Express was able to do was to match people who needed help to find these critical the critical needs of food, medicine, et cetera, even though those things weren't readily accessible, and to match those with people who had time. So our first project was with Concord, California, to help homebound people get fed during the pandemic. Our volunteers developed a replicable and scalable platform that allows people who need help and people who can provide help and governments who can deploy and coordinate help to easily share information and serve those in need quickly. We've launched in Walnut Creek, Paterson, New Jersey, and are implementing in other cities around the world. But again, this also goes back to really understanding both the needs of people who were homebound and the needs of people who are looking for something to do to then find a solution that would work for everyone. So with all of that said, I'm going to hand it over to Marlene Cortés, who will introduce a case study that dives deeper into how this process looks in practice.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Marlene Cortés. I hope you can hear me. I had a few audio issues this morning, but I hope it was fixed. I am the Senior Program Manager for CASH, which stands for Creating Asset Savings and Hope, and we're under the umbrella of Empire Justice Center here in Rochester, New York, which we are a statewide civil legal law firm. We have offices in Albany, Long Island, White Plains, and Yonkers. The CASH program is a VITA site, which is a volunteer low-income tax assistance program through the IRS, also known as a VITA site. And we serve to do free tax preparation for those who earn less than $56,000 a year. We serve over 5,000 families per year. A lot of our, before the pandemic, it was a lot face-to-face. 80% of the people using the program are repeat clients to our services. We provide a holistic service to get you down and get your taxes done, but we work to improve financial stability, give them financial education, provide any other resources that the client coming to CASH is going to need. Last year when COVID happened, we had to abruptly shut down, and we had about 400 tax returns that needed to be completed. We were completely lost and didn't know how to really handle this virtually. Part of the CASH program is the program that I manage, which is Rock Your Refund, which is it's funded by Bloomberg Philanthropy, and it's part of the What Works City Economic Mobility Initiative. And What Works City helps city government identify challenges for residents and provide cities with the tools effectively to improve residents' lives. Through this program, I was invited to a webinar that was presenting on the U.S. Digital Response program. So I attended the program, and because we are a partner with the City of Rochester, it qualified us to submit an application to the U.S. Digital Response team. Within a week's time, we received a response for an interview because at this point, CASH didn't know how we were going to proceed since most of our services were face-to-face. We were connected with Paul to help us figure this out because, this was all new to many of us, and we were trying to figure out, as if the rest of the world, how to proceed with what we were doing. The lack of in-person interaction was, we were trying to figure out how we're going to do that with COVID and the guidelines by the CDC. So we really were at a loss of what we were going to do next. Next slide. With Cash, we do a lot of one-on-one group financial coaching. That's the Rocket Refund Project. That's one of those where we do a match saving initiative. On site, the people will help them apply to a savings account, a checkings account. If it was easy to walk over to a desk and say, hey, listen, this person needs this, but how we were going to do that virtually, and we had no idea how to proceed with that kind of interaction and how to still meet the needs to our community, which is the hardest hit with the COVID. I'm just going through the, yep, so with in-person, we had screening persons there. We would go through the process, what they needed, what they wanted, and they would just walk over to another desk to see, it was like hopping desk to desk with different services to give that face-to-face interaction with the client. We are completely volunteer. So the volunteers would be on site as well, and then to help do the tax preparation and meet with the client. There was coordination of client support that we would give those coming in if they were behind on their rent, if they needed services in regards to, for their children, or they wanted some financial literacy services. We were able to provide all that at the tax site. Next slide. So with this in mind, our goal was to, how are we going to figure this out if we're doing this face-to-face, how we're going to do this virtually. And the U.S. Digital Response came in with Paul to help us identify what work needed to be done with Cash in order to meet that experience and to meet our goal and to still provide the services that we needed for our clients. My screen is kind of flickering here. So a lot of this product, like there were repeat clients coming back to Cash, and we didn't know how to focus with that. So we met with Paul, and Paul helped us figure this out, and Paul brought on other teams to help Cash to continue to give the experience to the clients, but in a virtual way that we had no experience in doing. So one of the things is our website. How are we going to communicate with our clients through their website? How to upload documents, how to get the documents from the clients to have their taxes done, how to make sure there was, how to deal with language barriers in our community, how to deal with the deaf and hard of hearing community. We had all these products on site, but how are we going to provide this virtually? With feedback of going forward, we needed to figure this out. And so this is when Paul came in to help Cash. And how we gave him how we did our services as part of Empire Justice Center. And Paul came in and rolled up his sleeve and says, this is how we can help. And I will hand it over to Paul.
Thanks, Marlene. Hi, my name is Paul Schreiber. I'm a volunteer with US Digital Response, and my background is in software engineering. I have worked on a variety of web projects for the last 25 years. And I came in and we had a US, and the Cash folks came to us originally, and they said, oh, we want some help with putting translations up on our site. And we talked with them for a while and realized that that was not the right problem to solve. Just translating the existing website wouldn't serve the needs of their volunteers, their staff, and their clients. And so we spent some time discussing how to improve the website more broadly. And we went and we sort of had to figure out what we wanted to do for them and who we need to serve with this. One of the things when you're building digital services is to really remember who the audience is. And for a lot of people, especially low-income folks, a mobile device is their primary or only method of internet access. So that was something we would take into consideration. And we wanted to make sure the site was fast and that it was mobile friendly. We also wanted to make sure that the language we used was clear and didn't use, just a lot of jargon around taxes or finance, and that there are a lot of people who are cash clients who don't have English as their primary language, and so we wanted to while you want to do this for any site, it was especially important to use simple language, to use short declarative sentences, to use familiar words. All right, and let's take a look at next here, and we can so there are three groups we had to serve with this project. Group number one is the cash staff itself. We wanted to make sure that anything we built was something that they could manage and maintain themselves. Our goal was not to have a long-term relationship where we're like a consulting group, where we're doing the work. We wanted to build something that would enable them to succeed on their own. The second group was the volunteers. So there's a whole bunch of folks who are clients of the website, but not clients of Cash, and we need to provide the volunteers with the tools and information they need to do their job. And then, of course, the third group is the much larger group of the thousands of Cash clients, and we wanted to make sure when they got to the website that they understood what Cash did and they understood what they needed to do to take advantage of those programs. All right, let's take a look at the next slide here. So we spent a lot of time talking with the Empire Justice Center team to understand what all the programs were and what they did. And one of the things that's challenging about any financial program is the specific language and terminology. And for example, Marlene mentioned VITA, which is an acronym very familiar to folks in the tax business, but something I wasn't familiar with. It's something like a lot of people who just need their taxes done aren't going to know. So you can see here on one of the buttons, we have a clear term, free tax prep. And we mentioned that it's VITA, so people know to look for that. They can see it. But for most folks, they just want to know that they can get their taxes done. All right. And the other project we worked on after completing the website was improving the Cash team's process so that they could serve people remotely. And that meant both clients sending in information digitally and volunteers performing tax prep from their homes. And this was a big, complicated project, and we spent a lot of time going and talking to the staff at the Empire Justice Center and figuring out what it is, how their current process worked, and how we thought it would work in the case where folks were not coming into the office at all, or as little as possible to avoid, catching or spreading COVID. And we had to figure out what we thought would work, and then we've been adjusting that as folks have been using it over the last couple of months. Let's take a look here. So when we started building the website, now the website is based on WordPress, which is really common, and there's only focused on the Cash programs portion of the site. We wanted to make sure that any work we did would not affect adversely the rest of the site, and we wanted to make sure, as I said, that any pages that we made could be easily edited by the Cash team. And parts of the other site used a proprietary editing tool, and we thought it was important to use standard WordPress editor so folks could use it more easily, and anybody who is familiar with other WordPress sites could make changes quickly. And we discussed what the language, vocabulary, and tone we used, and we wanted to make sure that it was clear what people could and couldn't do on the site. And as you've seen in some of the screenshots, if there was a button, we wanted to make sure it was obviously a button so people knew to click on it and that it wasn't just decorative text. And we want to make sure that the staff who needed to have access to the site did, and those who were not involved in maintaining the website were able to read it, but weren't able to get into the back end and make changes. Yeah. Let's take a look at the next slide here. Yeah. So we found a few problems. One of the things we noted was the website was running old versions of WordPress and old versions of various plugins. And not only that, the updates had been disabled. So a lot of these modern versions of software will automatically keep themselves up to date and secure. And because this had been disabled, we ended up with a security vulnerability where someone was able to get in and vandalize the site. And it took a little while figuring out how that happened in order to both update it and keep it and undo the work someone had done to break the update. One of the challenges we saw on the site was there were some pages where there was graphics containing text, and which is not an accessible way of communicating information. It's not something you can easily search for. You can't copy and paste text that's in a graphic. You can't translate it. And if you're using a screen reader or other assistive technology, you couldn't do that. So in order for even something to be translatable, it needed to be moved from within a graphic to on the page itself. We also wanted to make sure that the hierarchy and the way things were structured throughout the site was clear and understandable, and breaking it up into a way that made sense for clients and how they thought of what Cache did, and not necessarily how Cache thought of it itself. And let's see. One of the other things we worked on with regards to the workflow is that Cache wasn't able to get a lot of information on how tax prep was going throughout the process. So people would start submitting their information and volunteers would go ahead and start processing the tax returns, but they couldn't understand, for example, how long did it typically take for a return to be completed? And this is the tax return process had many steps where it was assigned to someone, and then it was the tax return was completed, then someone performed a quality review of the return, and then it was transmitted, and then it had to be picked up. And each stage in the process could take more or less time depending on the volunteers and the client and the complexity of the return and so on. But by tracking all this information, they're able to measure it, and they're able to A, serve more clients, and B, they're able to provide volunteers with assistance and coaching when needed. So if I was a volunteer and say it took me an average of 5 days to do a tax return, and it only takes Marlene an average of 3 days, we need to figure out, like, am I getting too many sent to me, or do I not know what I'm doing and I need coaching, or perhaps they're sending me returns that required something that I wasn't trained or certified in. And having all that information available lets them make adjustments during the tax season, and not, whereas before, if they were able to get this information at all, it was usually later. Let's take a look at the next slide here. This is an example of the prototyping we did. So I worked with a terrific designer, Zhao Lu, and he spent a whole bunch of time looking through the existing website and then mocking up using a tool called Figma. And it let us quickly and easily put together a new version of the website without doing any programming, and we could show folks what it could look like, and we could make changes to it really quickly. And we were able to go through a whole bunch of iterations using Figma. And then once we had settled on final design and content, we were able to go and build that out. We used a tool called Lucidchart to really understand the tax process, where I mentioned about the quality reviewing and the transmission and the pickup and so on. There were lots of steps, and because this process had not been formally documented before, we would have a meeting with the team, and they would say, "Oh, we thought of something else." And so by being able to write it all down and put it in a diagram, we were able to really understand what all the parts were and how it worked now, and then we were able to design how we wanted it to work, you know, as a virtual process for COVID. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. Yeah. So one of the important things we want to do here is try not to spend too much money. We look for tools that were free or tools that were that provided discounts for nonprofits. And the WordPress, which is what they're using for the website, is free software, and they pay to have it hosted. And we found them a hosting provider which was less expensive than what we were using before. We are using Airtable to manage and track all of the tax prep process, and we worked with the Airtable team to get the Empire Justice Center nonprofit pricing. We are exploring the use of Zendesk, which is a help desk program, which helps people manage inquiries. And similarly, they have a nonprofit program which provides 6 months of free use and then discounted after that. And for the cash program has continued to use DocuSign, which is a tool that lets people upload information and fill out forms and sign documents electronically. So we also want to make sure that we want to minimize the number of tools, because that every additional tool is additional complexity, it's additional usernames and passwords, it's something else you need to integrate, something else you need to maintain and remember. And we wanted to avoid building completely custom software, because then someone would have to maintain it indefinitely. So we're looking to assemble a collection of off-the-shelf components. And we wanted to make sure that this was something that was affordable. And so, for example, the price for Airtable is, I think we're $12 per user per month. So it's costing $24, per month for them, which is quite inexpensive. And the DocuSign, the Zendesk is free for 6 months. So we're able to evaluate it and see if it's a good fit without committing to anything long-term and without paying for, large amounts of money. All right, let's take a look at the next slide here. So you can see this is what the website looks like now. We have a bunch of clear graphics, which Ja drew or sourced, and we have short, clear declarative language, and we have a big red button for folks to request online taxes, and then we also show people where they can perform tax prep on their own if needed. So we have 3 big tiles, and all of this works equally well on a mobile device. And let's go and take a look at the next slide here. One of the things we wanted to do is cut down on the number of inquiries the cash team received. There were a lot of questions. A lot of their time was spent answering the same questions over and over. And we built a frequently asked questions section, and which lets them, provide answers to questions that are actually asked from their experience, and reduce the number of calls and emails that comes in, so people get their answers faster, and then the team is free to spend their time doing other work. Let's take a look at the next slide here. And you can see before and after versions of the cache homepage. The after version it is easier to read, it's higher contrast, there's a lot less text on the page, so it's more easily scanned and skimmed, so you can find what you need more quickly. And it's, as I mentioned, this is something that you can also see on your mobile device, and previously it was not as clear. One thing I'll highlight, it's a little hard to read, but there's some blue text in the middle of the old site that says click here. And the language click here is not accessible. So when you're using a screen reader or other assistive device, your device just reads out the name of the link. So if you just heard the words click here 3 times, you couldn't tell what you were actually going to visit with each page because they all have the same text. And by using more descriptive language on buttons and links, like read more about our impact, people know what they're getting to when they go to the next page. All right, and let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So these are some highlights from the website project, and we spent some time with automated code analysis tools and found and fixed over 3,000 errors. The website itself, as we've discussed repeatedly, it's clearer, it's more accessible, it's faster, it works on mobile devices. We also made sure that the site is stays up to date and is automatically patched. So any security vulnerabilities that are fixed are done automatically without the need for the cache team to go in and manually remember to update things. All right, and next. All right. So this is a quote from Christy at the Empire Justice Center, who we worked with closely, and she was very happy with the work of USDR and how we're able to help their clients. So by improving Cash's website, we're able to help clients easily learn more about the program, do so quickly and on their own time and on their own schedule. We're able to help facilitate having Cash provide a lot of services remotely, both allowing their volunteers to work safely from home and to allow clients to either provide all their information remotely or to drop it off and minimize the amount of time they had to spend in the Cash office.
So, Paul, this is Marlene. So just to give a little bit of background of how impactful this was, many of our families here have virtual learners at home, and coming to Cash and trying to get their taxes done was a real struggle and a stress for them. Doing this virtually, we've received positive feedback from clients to say this format worked for me. With virtual learners at home, it's difficult for me to leave the house. I can upload my information at the time that I have, free time to do that without the worry of that I'm not going to be able to get my taxes done, or how I'm going to get my taxes done where they're not going to charge me such a high fee. And that's from the client perspective. With how the whole website was revamped and with the work that Paul did with the Cash team, the clients are really liking this format. The internal team, the Cash staff also likes, because how are we going to keep connected virtually trying to do all these tax returns when normally when we're face to face, we'll just hop to desk to figure out where the tax prep was and what status. With all the tools and resources that Paul put that in place, we're able to see that virtually, not only for the Cash staff, but for the volunteer as well. They can see where the status is of where they're done, if it's been quality reviewed. So then the next person knows what their next step is to step in to help the client with their tax return or whatever services they may need. Also, when they go into the link, it tells us if the person has been stuck and they can't upload. So then the staff reaches out to the client to say, we see you had trouble uploading. Let's see where we can help you do that. We still are within the CDC guidelines. We do very limited in-person appointments, but it's still using the resources that Paul helped put together for the Cash team. Without this, I can tell you this would be very difficult. Many folks would not be able to get their tax returns done. With so much going on, with the stimulus being passed now, with the tax extension deadline has been extended. Now we're able to even reach out to those and say, hey, we can do amendments now because of the unemployment. There was a high unemployment rate as well with people coming in that have never used Cash before, but now they were income eligible. So these services that were provided, that Paul revamped our website and we're able to serve folks that we normally wouldn't have served in the past, and now we're providing a different type of level of service where people continue to be safe in their homes, but still get their taxes done and get the stimulus that many depend on during this pandemic.
Hi, Jessica, do you want to discuss the learnings from the
Can't hear you, Jessica.
Of Here we go again, I'm unmuted now. Thanks for both of you for sharing your story. I think that really gets to the power of user-centered design. And so a few key things worth highlighting from what we just listened to. One is make sure that you're identifying the correct stakeholders. Those are users. In this case, it was also the staff. And ensure that you're establishing clear feedback loops so you can ensure that you're building something collaboratively, but also it's efficient to get that feedback quickly. Next, for your target audience, identify the behaviors you're trying to drive. In this instance, it really was like, we want people to be able to get tax help. So how do we make sure that that is clear and accessible on the website, and you can see through the redesign that that's really what it's focused on. Next, incorporating opportunities for user research at the beginning of the project and user feedback at the end of the project. One of the things I really loved about this project, especially with the FAQs, is that you were able to learn a lot from staff who's answering calls to then figure out what are the right questions that should actually be on the FAQ page, rather than just assuming you knew what questions people would want answers to. Next, using design elements and content that are accessible. Paul made a lot of great mentions here, from contrast to ensuring the text is not too long to read, that it's mobile friendly. I also dropped a resource in the chat. 18F, which is a federal government group that does design work, has this incredible accessibility resource that you can all access that will help you find quick and easy ways to make your website more accessible. And then next, consider various options for a path forward, but ensure a full understanding of capabilities, what you're actually getting, and what the services are offering. So this is really, there may be many ways to solve the problem, but what you really want to do is leverage what you've learned from your stakeholders, from your end users, the behaviors you're trying to drive, to ensure that what you're actually building are the things that are going to be most impactful. Next slide. So a few other things that you've heard in here that we tend to practice at USDR is, follow the audience research function iteration model that we've spoken to at length. The other big one is using off-the-shelf tools. You don't have to build things from scratch. There are so many tools out there on the market that can help you do things easier, faster, more efficiently. Also in a way that ensures that your current staff is able to maintain what is being built. So don't feel like you have to start from zero. And then shameless plug, tap into existing sources of support like USDR. So next slide. So yes, we would love for you to connect with USDR if there is any way that we can help. You can get in touch with us on our website. No issue is too big or too small. You can submit a request for help. Also, if you just want to follow along, we do publish a lot of guides and information that even if you don't have an immediate project, it can help you see. We have social media guides and plenty of other guides. So feel free to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Also, you don't need to have a very specific request. You don't have to know what the solution is. If you come to us and have a sense of an understanding of what the problem is you're trying to solve, we can meet you where you are and then work with you to help drive to a great solution. And with all that said, we would love to work with you. So with that portion done, I think we can jump to questions. A few came through that I will go ahead and share. And then feel free to drop more in the chat as we get going. So Paul, I will point this one to you because this isn't the only website project you've worked on. So you may have some good insights to share. But if possible, can you also share entities you've worked with on the website to help people partner for adaptable digital services? So are they either resources, tools, or organizations that you've used?
So Well, is this a question about accessibility? Is that what we're asking about? Like it says,
Adaptable digital services.
Yeah.
So
I'm wondering if the questioner could clarify there.
let me see who's that. Sharon, I believe it was Sharon, can you provide a little bit more clarity on what you're trying to answer there? And what I'll do is I'll move to the next question while we get more information from Sharon. The next question is, I am the Returning Citizens Program Coordinator for Community Action Agency. Can these resources be utilized for the formerly incarcerated? So I guess there's probably two answers. So I'll start at least with USDR. We do have projects where we work with organizations that are helping the formerly incarcerated in many different ways. So if your organization is looking for help and your organization's mission is around helping the formerly incarcerated, do reach out. But I think this question may also be asking if programs like CASH and Marlene are available to formerly incarcerated.
This is Marlene. For the cash services that we offer, we go with the VITA site, which is through the IRS. If they have prepared or if they have earned income during the time that before the time they were incarcerated, they can still use the cash services. Virtually gives them the opportunity to do that. There'll be some barriers of them obtaining the information, but you will have to connect with your local VITA site.
Thank you. And then last question we have so far is, if we're not eligible for U.S. Digital Response Services ourselves, is there a good resource for consultant companies to reach out to who have worked with community action agencies looking to make changes to process technology for clients to receive our services? I would just flag that often what USDR is doing when we're talking to people is connecting the dots. So if you have questions or an area that we may be able to help find, maybe there's a service we can connect you with. It doesn't necessarily always mean that we're building out something for you or an organization. We can help channel your questions to find the right resource for you. And I'm not sure for those on the call, if any of you have also worked with consultant companies that have done similar work for community action agencies. Sound like it, but if anyone has any other leads, feel free to drop them in the chat. Are there any other questions? Oh, great question from Samuel. I've already reached out to US Digital Response for help with the emergency rental assistance program. My technologist has informed me there's an ERAP team at USDR. I would like to know if there will be a sort of case study. And Elizabeth is sharing that is our next theme for our next webinar panel that we're partnering with NCAP on. And yes, there will definitely be a case study. One thing that I don't think came out, but I just want to make sure you're all aware, is USDR is trying to do as much work as possible in the open. We understand that often problems we're trying to solve for one organization or one city probably exist in other organizations in other cities. So we want to leverage all of our learnings so that it can help as many people as possible. So we do publish blog posts, case studies, and other information to help ensure that more people are able to leverage the work that we do. And then one final question, how are we able to maintain your organization with volunteers and on a pro bono basis? Through the generosity of incredible people. We have in the first year, just for context, it was fully volunteer run for almost 6 months. And that was, I think, because at the time last year, people were really looking for a way to contribute and do something with the skills they had. And it was, this is a great place for people with tech skills who often aren't able to leverage those in volunteer opportunities to continue to do the work. We received some funding so that we now are able to maintain a staff, but still we're probably 95% volunteer run. And it really is just through generosity of people who are helpers that want to run to where the challenges are and help.
Yeah, Jessica, can I talk about that
Yes.
for a sec? So I'm one of the volunteers, and like there's always lots of opportunities to volunteer in your community, but sometimes people want to help out in a way that where they say, oh, you know, I have a particular skill set which could be valuable to someone. So you might be a designer or an accountant or, you know, a writer, and you say, how can I use those skills to help out? And the U.S. Digital Response provides a great way to contribute in that way as well.
Yes, and Paul is a longtime volunteer. We are so lucky to have him on board. And also Ja, who was the designer on this project, has also been an amazing volunteer. I'll give it one more second to see if there are any additional questions. Okay, it looks like we're good on the Q&A front. We will be sharing this deck out to all of you, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to learn about USDR, to learn more about user-centered design. Yeah, I'll turn it back over to the NCAP team.
Great, thank you, thank you, thank you. Isn't it exciting? I'm so glad to see we have a community action agency who's already reached out to U.S. Digital Response for assistance. So great to hear. You know, sometimes you think something's too good to be true. That's might be how some of you are feeling at the moment, that you can get all this great technical assistance at no cost, but it isn't too good to be true. It's true. So take advantage of the opportunity and their expertise to help you get to where you want to go when it comes into the technology world. I did want to share with you some of our upcoming webinars. We have one coming up on March 31st. This is very exciting. We've partnered with a national marketing firm called Strategic America, and they have created for us a vast array of templates to use on many different social media platforms, and we're going to teach you how to use them. So they will go through the templates and we'll show you how to access them and use them to tell your story at the local level about how your agency responded to the pandemic. So it's coming up 31st. Next slide, please. We'll be back on the 14th of April with U.S. Digital Response with adapting to remote processes, tips for improving digitized workflows. And we just touched on that a little bit towards the end of this one. So I know many of you will want to come back and hear and learn more on April 14th. Next slide, please. We will also be bringing the third of our 8-part series of disaster recovery resilient toolkit with Melanie Herman, Melanie Lockwood Herman. That will be held on April 15th. And Melanie always brings us great trainings. We want to encourage you to participate in that as well. And I do believe we have a slide, next slide please, about the upcoming Equity Summit. If you have not registered for the Equity Summit yet, we have a registration link here in the slide. It's being held April 19th through the 21st. I've seen some of the lineup of webinars and speakers, and it is going to be spectacular. So I strongly encourage you to consider being a participant in that summit. And with that, on this slide is contact information for myself and for Erin Wicks, who is the VP of Organizational Capacity and Building. And we look forward to learning with you more in the upcoming webinars. Thanks so much. Denise will be getting the slide deck and the recording out to all of you soon. Thank you, and thanks to U.S. Digital Response, Jessica, Marlene, and Paul. We very much appreciated your expertise.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.